Lily had always thought her grandfather's lighthouse was just an old building that guided ships safely to shore. But as the storm clouds gathered on the horizon that evening, she was about to discover that some lights do far more than show the way home. They heal the hearts of everyone who sees them shine. Welcome to this peaceful bedtime story. Tonight, we're going to visit a lighthouse by the sea with Lily, a young woman who's about to rediscover the magic that's been waiting for her all along. Before we begin this gentle journey, I want you to settle deeply into your bed, adjusting your pillows until they cradle you perfectly, and pulling your covers up to create your own cozy sanctuary. Close your eyes gently, and as we follow Lily's story together, allow your breathing to become slow and natural. Feel your body sinking deeper into your mattress with each breath, just as Lily feels herself sinking into the comfort of coming home after a long time away. Our story begins on a late Friday afternoon in early autumn, when the air carries that crisp promise of changing seasons and the light takes on that golden quality that makes everything look like a painting. Lily is driving along a winding coastal road she hasn't traveled in 5 years, her hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than necessary. The windows of her small car are rolled down, and the salt air fills her lungs with each breath, bringing back a flood of childhood memories that make her both smile and feel a gentle ache in her chest. She's been living in the city for so long, now caught up in the endless cycle of work and responsibilities, meetings and deadlines, that she'd almost forgotten what real quiet sounds like. But as she drives further away from the highway and closer to the sea, she can feel something inside her beginning to unwind, like a tightly coiled spring slowly releasing its tension. The road curves around a hillside covered in wild grasses that dance in the ocean breeze, and suddenly, there it is, the lighthouse, her grandfather's lighthouse, standing tall and proud against the darkening sky. Its white tower gleaming in the late afternoon sun like a beacon of welcome. Lily's breath catches in her throat, and she has to pull over for a moment just to take it in. The lighthouse looks exactly as she remembers it from her childhood visits, when her grandfather would lift her up onto his shoulders and carry her around the grounds, telling her stories about the ships he'd guided safely home and the storms he'd weathered in his little keeper's cottage. The red roof of the cottage beside the tower glows warmly in the golden light, and she can see smoke rising from the chimney, which means her grandfather is home, probably preparing his evening tea, just as he has every day for as long as she can remember. Lily sits in her car for a few more moments, feeling her heartbeat slow to match the steady rhythm of the waves she can hear crashing against the rocks below. Something about this place has always made her feel instantly calmer, as if the lighthouse itself radiates a peaceful energy that seeps into anyone who comes near it. She takes a deep breath, gathering her courage, and drives the last quarter-mile down the narrow lane that leads to the lighthouse keeper's cottage. As she parks her car beside the small stone wall that surrounds the property, the front door of the cottage opens, and there he is, her grandfather, Thomas, looking just as she remembered him, though perhaps a little grayer around the edges. He's wearing his familiar wool sweater and the same comfortable boots he's worn for 20 years, and his face lights up with the warmest smile when he sees her stepping out of the car. "Lily, my dear girl," he calls out, his voice carrying that same gentle strength that used to comfort her during thunderstorms when she was small. "I was hoping you'd arrive before the sun set. Come here and give your old grandfather a proper hug." She runs to him then, feeling like a child again, and wraps her arms around his solid, reassuring presence. He smells like pipe tobacco and sea salt and something warm and comforting that she can't quite name, but that instantly makes her feel safe and loved. They stand there holding each other for a long moment, and Lily feels tears prick at her eyes as she realizes how much she's missed this feeling of unconditional love and acceptance. "I'm so glad you came," Thomas says quietly, pulling back to look at her face with those wise blue eyes that seem to see straight into her soul. "I know you've been having a difficult time lately, and I thought perhaps a few days by the sea might help restore your spirits." Lily nods, not trusting herself to speak just yet. She had called him last week in tears, overwhelmed by the stress of her job and the loneliness of her life in the city, feeling like she was drowning in responsibilities and expectations. Without hesitation, he had invited her to come stay with him for as long as she needed, and something about the way he said it made her know that this was exactly where she was meant to be. "Come inside," Thomas says, taking her small suitcase from her hands. "I've made your favorite chamomile tea, and there's a pot of stew simmering on the stove. We can watch the sunset from the kitchen window while we eat, and then I'll show you how the lighthouse works these days. It's all automated now, you know, but I still like to check on it every evening, just to make sure our light is shining bright for any sailors who might need it." The cottage is exactly as Lily remembers it. Small and cozy and filled with the kind of warmth that comes from decades of love and laughter. The kitchen is the heart of the home, with its wooden table, worn smooth by countless meals and conversations, and windows that look out over the endless expanse of ocean. Thomas bustles around, serving up bowls of the most delicious-smelling beef stew Lily has ever encountered, and she settles into her childhood chair at the table, feeling her shoulders relax for the first time in months As they eat, Thomas tells her about his quiet days at the lighthouse, how he tends his small garden and reads his books and watches the ships pass by on the horizon. He talks about the seabirds that nest on the cliffs nearby and how he's learned to predict the weather by watching the clouds and feeling the wind. His voice is soothing and gentle, and Lily finds herself becoming more relaxed with each word, as if his calm presence is gradually dissolving all the anxiety and stress she's been carrying. "You know," Thomas says, thoughtfully, cutting a thick slice of homemade bread and passing it to her with butter. "I've been thinking a lot lately about what it means to be a lighthouse keeper. People always assume it's about the ships and the navigation, and of course, that's important. But I think there's something deeper to it than that." Lily looks up at him curiously, spreading the creamy butter on her warm bread. Outside the kitchen window, the sun is beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink that reflect on the calm surface of the water. "I think," Thomas continues, his eyes growing distant as he gazes out at the horizon, "that lighthouses are really about hope. They're about showing people that even in the darkest night, even in the worst storm, there's always a light shining. Somewhere, there's always a safe harbor waiting. And sometimes, that's all people need to know, that somewhere out there, someone is keeping the light on for them." His words settle into Lily's heart like a warm blanket, and she feels something inside her chest loosen and release. She realizes that this is exactly what she's been missing in her busy city life. This sense of purpose and connection. This feeling that she's part of something larger and more meaningful than just her own daily struggles. After dinner, Thomas leads her outside into the gathering dusk. The air is crisp and clean, filled with the sound of waves and the cry of seabirds settling in for the night. The lighthouse tower rises above them, solid and reassuring against the darkening sky, and Thomas pulls out an old brass key from his pocket. "Would you like to climb up with me?" he asks, his eyes twinkling. "I know you used to love going to the top when you were small. The light comes on automatically now, but I still like to check everything personally each evening." "You know," Lily nods eagerly, and they enter the lighthouse through the heavy wooden door at its base. Inside, the circular staircase winds upward through the tower, just as she remembers it. The steps are worn smooth by generations of lighthouse keepers, and their footsteps echo softly in the enclosed space as they climb slowly upward. Thomas moves carefully but steadily, and Lily matches his pace, feeling no need to rush. There's something meditative about the spiral climb, the way each step takes them a little higher, a little closer to the light at the top. Through the small windows that punctuate the staircase. She can see the landscape growing smaller below them. The cottage and the cliffs and the endless ocean spreading out in all directions. "Tell me about the ships," Lily says as they climb, remembering how her grandfather used to regale her with stories about the vessels he'd guided safely home over the years. Thomas smiles, pausing for a moment to catch his breath. "Oh, my dear, there have been so many over the years. Fishing boats coming home with their catch, cargo ships carrying goods from distant ports, pleasure craft full of families enjoying a day on the water. And during storms, well, that's when the lighthouse truly proves its worth." He continues climbing, his voice taking on that storytelling rhythm that Lily remembers so well. "I remember one night, it must have been 15 years ago now, there was a terrible storm. The wind was howling something fierce, and the rain was coming down in sheets. I was up in the lamp room, making sure everything was working properly, when I saw this little sailboat struggling in the waves." Lily finds herself leaning in closer, just as she used to when she was a child, listening to her grandfather's tales. The boat was being tossed around like a toy, Thomas continues, and I could see that whoever was sailing it was having trouble finding their way back to the harbor. So I did what lighthouse keepers have always done. I made sure our light was shining as bright as it could, and I stood watch until that little boat made it safely to shore. They've reached the lamp room now, the circular chamber at the top of the lighthouse where the great light lives. The room is filled with the intricate machinery that makes the lighthouse work, all brass and glass and precise engineering. And at the center of it all is the lamp itself, a powerful beacon that can be seen for miles across the water. Thomas moves around the equipment with practiced ease, checking gauges and adjusting settings, his hands sure and gentle on the familiar mechanisms. The light comes on automatically at sunset, he explains to Lily, but I still like to be here when it happens. There's something special about that moment when the light first begins to shine. As if on cue, the great lamp begins to glow, starting as a soft warmth and gradually building to a brilliant beacon that sends its beam sweeping across the darkening ocean. Lily gasps softly at the sight, remembering suddenly how magical this moment had seemed to her as a child, and how it still feels magical now. Every night, Thomas says quietly, standing beside her as they watch the light begin its steady rotation. This light reaches out across the water, letting everyone know that there's a safe place here, that someone is watching over them, that they're not alone in the darkness. Key. Lily feels tears gathering in her eyes again, but this time they're not tears of sadness or stress. They're tears of recognition, of coming home, of remembering who she really is beneath all the worry and fear she's been carrying. She understands now why her grandfather brought her up here, why he wanted her to see this. "Grandpa," she says softly, "I think I've been lost at sea for a while now." Thomas turns to her with that same warm, understanding smile he's always had. "I know, my dear. That's why you're here." Sometimes we all need someone to keep the light on for us until we can find our way home. They stand together in comfortable silence, watching the lighthouse beam sweep across the water, and Lily feels something fundamental shifting inside her. The constant anxiety that has been her companion for so long begins to fade, replaced by a deep sense of peace and belonging that she hadn't even realized she was missing. "Come," Thomas says, eventually. "Let's go back down to the cottage. Make us some hot cocoa, and we can sit by the fire for a while." The descent down the lighthouse stairs feels different than the climb up. Lily's steps are lighter, her breathing easier, and she feels as though she's carrying something precious with her. Some essential truth that will change everything going forward. Back in the cottage, Thomas busies himself in the kitchen while Lily settles into the comfortable armchair by the fireplace. The cottage is warm and cozy, filled with a soft light from oil lamps and the crackling sound of the fire. Through the windows, she can see the lighthouse beam making its steady rotation. A constant reminder that even in the darkness, there is always light. Thomas returns with 2 steaming mugs of cocoa topped with marshmallows, just like he used to make for her when she was small. The hot chocolate is rich and sweet and perfect, and Lily wraps her hands around the warm mug, feeling the heat seep into her palms and up her arms. "Grandpa," she says, curling up in the chair like a child, "tell me about when you first became a lighthouse keeper." "I don't think I've ever heard that story." Thomas settles into his own chair, his face taking on that distant look that means he's traveling back in time. "Well, that's a story worth telling," he says, his voice soft and warm. "I was about your age, actually, when I first came here. I'd been working in the city in an office job that made me feel like I was slowly disappearing. I was restless and unhappy, searching for something I couldn't even name." Lily leans forward, recognizing herself in his description. "One day," Thomas continues, "I saw an advertisement in the newspaper for a lighthouse keeper position. Something about it called to me, even though I'd never lived by the ocean before. I applied on impulse, and somehow, miraculously, I got the job." He pauses to sip his cocoa, and the fire crackles softly in the grate. "The first night I was here, alone. I was terrified. The lighthouse seemed so big, and the ocean so vast, and I felt so small and insignificant. But then the light came on, that beautiful, powerful beam reaching out across the water, and suddenly I understood. Lily asks softly that being small doesn't mean being insignificant, Thomas says, his eyes bright with memory, that even one small light can make an enormous difference in the darkness. That night, I found my purpose, and I've never regretted it for a single day. They sit in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their cocoa and listening to the gentle sounds of the cottage settling around them. Outside, the lighthouse continues its faithful rotation, and Lily finds the rhythm of it incredibly soothing, like a visual lullaby that makes her eyelids grow heavy. I think, she says sleepily, I've forgotten what peace feels like. Thomas reaches over and pats her hand gently. Peace isn't something you find, my dear. It's something you remember. It's been inside you all along, just waiting for you to come home to yourself. As the evening wears on, Thomas tells her more stories about his years at the lighthouse. He tells her about the storms he's weathered, the ships he's guided home, the wildlife he's observed from his unique vantage point. He tells her about her grandmother, who used to tend a beautiful garden behind the cottage, and who would wave to the passing ships from the rocks below. He tells her about the letters he's received over the years from sailors who were grateful for the light that guided them safely through dark nights. Each story is like a gift, wrapping Lily in warmth and love, and the deep knowledge that she is part of something beautiful and meaningful. The anxiety that has been her constant companion for so long continues to fade, replaced by a growing sense of calm and purpose. Eventually, Thomas shows her to her old room, the small guest bedroom that still contains the twin bed she slept in as a child, and the same quilt her grandmother had made by hand. The room smells like lavender and sea air, and the window looks out directly at the lighthouse, so she can see its comforting beam from her bed. Sleep well, my dear, Thomas says, kissing her forehead just like he used to when she was small. Tomorrow we'll have breakfast together, and then I'll show you the tide pools down on the rocks. But for now, just rest. Let the lighthouse watch over you. The bed is just as comfortable as she remembers, soft and welcoming, and she can hear the gentle sound of waves against the rocks below, and the distant cry of seabirds settling in for the night. But most of all, she's aware of the lighthouse beam sweeping past her window every few seconds, a constant, reliable presence that makes her feel completely safe and protected. Each time the light passes by, it fills her room with a soft, warm glow that seems to say, you are not alone. You are watched over. You are loved. As she lies there in the darkness, Lily thinks about her grandfather's words about lighthouses being symbols of hope. She realizes that he has been her lighthouse all these years, keeping a light on for her even when she was too lost in her own struggles to see it. And now, lying here in this place that has always meant safety and love to her, she understands that she can be a lighthouse too, for herself and for others who might be lost at sea. The beam passes by her window again, and this time Lily finds herself smiling. Tomorrow, she'll help her grandfather tend the light. She'll learn more about what it means to be a keeper of hope, a guardian of safe harbor for those who need it most. But for now, she's content to simply rest in the knowledge that she's exactly where she belongs, outside. The ocean continues its eternal rhythm, and the lighthouse continues its faithful watch. The beam sweeps across the water again and again, reaching out into the darkness with its message of hope and guidance and home. And in her comfortable bed, surrounded by love and protected by light, Lily finally allows herself to drift into the most peaceful sleep she's had in years. In her dreams, watching over ships full of people who are finding their way home. The light is warm and bright and strong, and she knows with absolute certainty that as long as there are people who need guidance, there will always be someone keeping the light on for them. The lighthouse beam continues its rotation throughout the night, a silent guardian watching over the sleeping cottage and the peaceful ocean and the dreams of a young woman who has finally remembered what it feels like to be truly home. And if you listen very carefully, you might hear the gentle sound of waves against the rocks and the soft whisper of the wind through the seagrass, and the quiet turning of the light that never stops shining, never stops hoping, never stops calling the lost ones safely home. Rest now, just as Lily rests, knowing that somewhere in the darkness there's always a light shining for you. There is always a safe harbor waiting. There is always someone keeping watch, making sure you are not alone in the night. Let the rhythm of the waves and the warmth of the lighthouse beam carry you into your own peaceful dreams, where you too can remember what it feels like to be completely safe, completely loved, and completely at home.